So, welcome to the second day of our workshop. And today we'll be continuing with what we started yesterday. But for time, we weren't able to complete, so we'll be continuing that today. And yesterday, a question was also raised, but because of time constraints, we weren't able to answer that question. So, we would like to get that out of the way. Then we begin with the agenda we have for today. So yesterday, for the benefit of those who don't know the question that was asked, a question was asked with regards to page numbering. And this is what it says. So how does the system handle page numbering in situations where some pages require no numbering, others do require, we also need Roman numerals and all that. So we would quickly try to demonstrate this so that everyone has a clear understanding of how that is achieved. So just as usual, we'll be switching between interfaces, i.e. the PowerPoint and our code editor. So to do this, we will go to our code editor to make a quick demonstration. Right. So I'm showing the code editor. Okay. So let's delve straight into the question. So the question has to do with page numbering. How do we address the issue of page numbering? How do we address the issue of page numbering? So for instance, if we want to do some page numbering, right? Let's get some content into our code editor and try and figure out how we are going to achieve that. So, as I mentioned yesterday, we are going to be making use of a template or a document where we are not going to type out everything because of the issue of time constraints. So, this is a package we can call to assist us when we need text. Now, assuming we would want, let's say, no page numbering for our first page, because with LaTeX, it automatically assigns page numbers. If you don't want page numbering, then it means that you have to clearly state that you do not need page numbering. So how do we achieve this? Right. So remember yesterday, we also mentioned that with LaTeX, we make very good use of our forward slashes. So usually when you are using a package or you are working in the main body, if it's not the actual content, all other things usually starts with a forward slash. So if we don't want page numbering, we don't want page numbering for this particular page we are working on. So we are calling it this page style, and we want to assign it as empty, right? So we don't want page numbering for this particular page. Sorry, so let's move this here, right? We don't want page numbering for this particular page. Now I want to generate some document for it or some information. So yes, then let's say 1, right? So with this particular page, we don't want page numbering for this. Let me clear this for the time being. So let's try to recompile. Right, so we have some information here, and we realize that there is no page numbering for this particular page. And it's by virtue of the fact that we clearly stated that with this page style, we want it to be empty, which means there should be no numbering assigned to that. So let's move to the next page, right? Which is a new page. So again, / new page to demonstrate that we want a new page. Now, with this new page that we want, let's say we want to give it maybe Roman numerals, okay? So page numbering, then Let's say we want Roman numerals, so Roman, right? Now let's try to generate some dummy text for it to just demonstrate some, maybe 2. And let's try to recompile and see if we get a second page. Right. So we get a second page, and with this second page, we realize that there is a numbering here, and it is in Roman numerals. It is in Roman numerals. Let's try one last demonstration. Right. So assuming we don't want Roman numerals again, and maybe we want, let's say, numbers, okay? Let's say numbers. So we go page numbering. Then with regards to numbers, right? Numbers are Arabic numerals. Numbers are Arabic numerals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those are Arabic numerals. So we specify, say Arabic. Let's give it some content. Some maybe 3. But we have to give it a new page, right? So that we observe what happens. So let's specify that we want to have that on a new page. So new page, take this off. Then we recompile to see if you are going to get the Arabic numerals. Right. So we move to the third page and realize that now we have Arabic numerals, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. So because we are starting with the first Arabic numeral, so it is 1. Right. So I hope the person who asked the question about page numbering, your doubts or the misunderstanding or confusion you have has been cleared. So we move back to our agenda for today. Right. So in our thesis document, one thing that comes up a lot has to do with inserting figures and inserting tables. This always comes up in our thesis document. How do we use LaTeX to achieve these, right? What is the approach we can use? So that is what today's session will be talking about, including some other matters. So today we are going to talk about generating tables, inserting figures, floating environment, cross-referencing, how to attach footnotes to our documents, and how to create appendices. Right. So when it comes to generating tables, right? Now we know that if we have a document and we want to organize them in a form of rows and columns, then we employ or deploy the services of a table. Now in LaTeX, how do we structure our table? Right. So we use Tabula to be able to create tables in LaTeX. Now with the content of our table, right, with every box, right, let's put it that way for easy understanding. We can either decide to make the content there centered. We can decide to push it to the right. We can decide to push it to the left. And these definitions, right, are given by L, C, and R. So you can specify where L represents left, C represents center, then R represents right. Now, if you want to separate these columns, you use the and symbol, this and symbol. And let's say you are done with specifying a particular column and you want to move to the next row, right? Then use 2 forward slashes. And because usually in our tables, we either want to have them separated by lines where people refer to them as margins, or we don't want that. So if we want that, we have to use the H line, where H here represents horizontal. Horizontal lines. And when you want to add borders, This is not an L. This is a pipe symbol, pipe, right? If you want to add borders, you add this pipe symbol to show that you want to add a border to it. So having explained this, let's try to implement this particular image we have over here and see how it looks or how it's even done in LaTeX. So I'll be switching to the code editor. And please, we are doing it you are following along as I am doing it. So if you have any challenge, you draw my attention to it, then we find a way to resolve that. So because I'm using the same structure, I will just clear the earlier example I demonstrated. Then we begin with the new example we want to show. So we clear this, right? In fact, let's change this to reports. So you remember yesterday we talked about document classes, and we have 5 main document classes in LaTeX, and report forms one of those. So we want to insert a table, right? A table. How do we achieve this? How do we achieve insertion of a table? So let's remember yesterday we learned how to create a session also. So I'm doing all these things just so that we are prompted of what we studied yesterday, just as a refresher. So we learned how to create a session, right? Now I want to create a table beneath this session. How do we achieve that? So we have to begin with the table first off, because it's a table we want to create. So begin. Right? Now you have to specify what you want to create. What do we want to create? We want to create a table. Now realize that immediately I hit enter, the IntelliSense produces all the functionalities that we need to deploy a table or to bring a table up, right? So we have this as centering. So centering here means that we want to center our table, right? Then we have begin tabula, and in that you have into curly braces C and a pipe symbol and another C. This is demonstrating that we are going to have 2 columns. Assuming we want to have 3 columns, we add an extra. So pipe symbol C, right? And these pipe symbols are used to demonstrate what borders, as we mentioned, borders, right? So now we want to start with our table. Let's assume we want our table also to have lines beneath each one, right? So we make use of the H line, as I mentioned, H line, right? To show, so this will be the first line in our table. Now with tables also, you realize that you can't just start with a table content without having a header that describes what we have in the table. So we want to have our table header. And mostly to separate the table header from the content of our table itself, we need to bring some form of differentiation in terms of the font, So in this case, we are going to make it bold. Our table header, we are going to make it bold. So how do we do that? So we know that it is a text, right? Then BF, which is demonstrating or showing bold fonts. Okay, bold font. Then let's say our table, we want a table that shows the language. By language, I mean programming language, the year that programming language, let's say, came about and what we use that programming language for. Okay, so the first one, we are creating our table headers. So language. Then remember we said we use the and, right, to separate the content of these tables. So, and we want the year this programming language came about. So this, then we put in, say, year, right? Because we are saying that our table is going to have maybe rows. So let's say 3 columns, okay, and let's say maybe 4 rows or 3 rows. So we have another end so that we have our last row there. So let's say date created. So text BF, then date created, right? So we are done with our header, right? Now, as we are done with our header, we want to bring another horizontal line beneath it. So we have H line, right? Now let's continue with this next content of our table, right? So having specified that we need the language, the year, and the date created, it means that the next content, which falls directly beneath the language, you are going to produce a language name, right? So let's say maybe we want to talk about Python, right? We also want to talk about maybe the year Python came about. Let's just assume this in no way says that this is the year it came about. I stand to be corrected. So then let's say the date created. So this is the year, right? The year. Let's make this one the main use. Sorry. So there is the same as the date created. So let's say main use or purpose of it, main use. So we know that in the field of data science, we usually employ Python programs. So let's say maybe it's used for data science, right? Now we have these 2 forward slashes here, which indicates that we are moving on to the next set, right? I forgot to include that over here. So the next set, let's say we call it maybe C++, plus. Let's say C++ came about, maybe let's give it maybe 1995. Then we have, what do we normally use C++ for? So let's maybe, let's say game development, right? Then we bring out 2 forward slashes. Then we move on to, let's create one last one. So maybe Java, maybe 1994, right? Then, and so what do we think we normally use Java for? Let's say maybe web development. Web development, right? Good. So we are done. Now we bring our 2 slashes. Now we want to create a line beneath each of the contents in the table. So let's put our H line here. Again, we would have it over here. H line. Again, we'll have it over here. Right. So I hope we are all on the same page. No confusion anywhere yet. Right. So let's try to run this and see the output. If it is not the way we expect it, we try to edit it well. Right. So we have our table here, right? And we have our table caption as caption. So assuming we just want to change our table caption to maybe info on programming languages. Let's just recompile, see if it changes. Right. So we have this. Now you realize that after we did that, it is appearing on top of the introduction. But in our code, the introduction is before the table. This is where the issue of floating environment comes in. So if you don't specify where exactly you want your table to be, then LaTeX assumes a position that it deems fit for it. So if you want to specify exactly, I think we have a question in the chat. I can't see the chats. Let's see the chat. We have the table here now, right? And the table is appearing on top of the introduction, right? And I mentioned with LaTeX, it assumes where you want it to be unless you specify, right? So in the process of specification, this is where the floating environment comes in. So how do you do that, right? So the floating environment is also a package. So it means that you have to go and call that package. Then you can make use of it, right? So let me quickly do that. Then I keep the screen stable for a while so you can also replicate. So use package, and we are talking about floating environment. So float, right? And with this float, if you specify H, the letter H, it means that it should be here, right? Which means that it should be at the present location for which the code has been written here. If you specify P, it would assume you want it on the next page where P means page, right? And so on and so forth. So there are different conventions for it. So let's say we want it here. So we specify H for that. Now let's try to recompile and see if we achieve that. Right. So realize that it has moved beneath the introduction, right? So that has to do with floating environments, which I'll be explaining in, I think, the next 2 or 3 slides. So this is about it for our table, right? So there are other, you can decide to merge a table. You realize that there are some tables that the first level of the table, it is merged together. There are various ways you can also approach this to achieve that, right? So as you've gotten the basics of how to do this, I would implore you that going forward, you also go through the documents to be able to understand how you can also achieve all those variants of tables. So realize that we have CCC here, which means center, which means our content should be in the center, right? So assume you want it to be on the left. So we specify L, and L for left. So let's try to recompile and so we take notice of the table and how it behaves. Right. So realize that the contents have shifted to the left than its former position, which was center. If you want it to the right, also you specify R, right? And the number of lengths is dependent on the number of columns you have, right? 1, 2, 3. So you specify 3 lengths. Okay, 3 left, sorry. Okay, so I think we can move on to our next slide. Okay, so let's move on to inserting figures. This is our slide. All right, so we're on table, so you are done with tables, so move on to figures, right?
All right.
Now, in our thesis also, we can't do away with figures, right? How do we achieve that? How do we insert figures? So we use the graphics package, right, to be able to load or insert images into our document. And LaTeX will automatically manage how the numbering and placement of this figure is. And again, this also has to do with the floating environment because LaTeX will automatically put it where it has to be, right? So if you don't want that, you also specify where you want it to be, just like how we described that in the table also. Okay, so let's go back to our code editor. Then let's try to clear. Okay, let's clear this part. And clear this. Right. So with this, if you have any image on your local drive that you'd want to use that as demonstration, that is fine. So I would also be using an image I also have on my local drive. So we want to learn how to insert an image, right? We want to learn how to insert an image. So let's just start with a session and call this session maybe, because the image I want to insert is a DISAL related image. So let's say DISAL information, and let's give it a dummy text, because we have the dummy text package already there, so we can make use of it. Now we want to begin our table, our figure, right? So just as we started with begin for our table, same applies over here. But in this case, the catch is we put in figure, right? Figure, then we hit on enter. So you realize that when we hit on enter, IntelliSense also gives us all the functionalities we need to achieve um, a, a figure, right? So here it's saying that centering, which means that we want to center our figure. Then include graphics, right? Graphics, which means an image, right? And maybe we want to specify the image, but I don't have the image here, so I'll quickly insert the image I want to put here. So let me just go to figure. I'm going to upload from my PC. Let's say DISAL logo 1. Maybe that's what I want to insert. So it is inserting. So realize that immediately you insert, it automatically fills up the spot with the name of the image or how you have saved it, right? If the image is also a hyperlink, there is a way to also model that. So let's say the caption, we want to caption the image. We want to give a caption to the image. So let's say DISAL logo, right? DISAL logo. This is the caption we want to give to our image, right? So let's try to run it and see. If you don't have the image within your code editor, right, and you want to use a hyperlink approach, you can also do that. But if you have any dummy image, you can just try to just insert it for demonstration purposes. So let's try to do this and see what we have. So this is the challenge what I mentioned with regards to the floating. So you see, because we didn't specify where we want it to be, right? So even, okay, so I think there are double, we have placeholder here, placeholder here. So let's just clear this part. So our error message goes away here. So we have this, then begin figure. So they were duplicated. So we cleared this also, right? So we realize that we have our image over here. Now, this is not where we want our image to be, right? We want our image to be directly beneath the DISAL information text. So again, we have to specify that. So because we have already called the package float, so we can make use of that. Okay, so sorry. So with this, we are using square brackets, because it's optional, right? Remember yesterday we mentioned if it is optional, you use square brackets. If it's by compulsion or compulsory, you use the curly braces. So H, where H here means that we want it to be here. H meaning here, where here means we want it to be exactly at the location where we have specified. So we try to recompile and see if we can achieve that. Right. So we have been able to achieve that, right? So this is it about how we insert images. You can insert multiple images. You just have to repeat the code and just specify over here the type of image you want to insert. So again, I'll leave this for about 30 seconds. Then we can move on to the next slide. Okay. So you are done with generation of tables. You are done with inserting figures. Okay. Now, whatever I've discussed with regards to table and figures and where we want it to be boils down to the floating environment, which I've mentioned previously. So these floating environments would allow you in LaTeX to automatically place elements at places where you want it to be exactly, right? And some common floating environments we can talk about is figure table, even with equations, right? You want equation to be at a particular place, you can make use of this floating environment, which would be talked about later with regards to equations. Now, where you want it to be, right? Whether you want it to be here at the top, at the bottom, or on the next page, you can specify that. So I believe we have demonstrated this concept of floating environments with regards to the table and figure. So we would go past this slide. Then we move on to cross-referencing, right? Cross-referencing. So if you have, or you want to put an image in your document, right? Now, you would have to give a preamble to that, okay? That maybe figure 1 demonstrates an image of Dysal logo before the image comes in, right? That is how you are supposed to do it when you are structuring your thesis documents. You have to first give a preview, or you have to first state what you are coming towards, dump in there before you dump it actually. So this is where we can make use of the referencing, right? Now we can make use of referencing or EQRef, where this one has to do with equation referencing, right? And this has to do with, you can use this for image or even table, right? So it says that cross-referencing, sorry, would allow you to perform automatic referencing of numbered elements which are found in your document, right? And this is created using the label, whilst the references are made using the ref and the EQRef. So we would also demonstrate that. Okay, yes, right. So fortunate for us, we already have an image over here, right? We already have an image over here. So we would want to use this image to demonstrate what we refer to as the cross-referencing, right? So we have our dummy content over here, and we want to insert our image, but we want to first give a short statement to show that we want to put our image down there. So how do we do that? So let's call this is just a placeholder, right, which was given automatically. So let's call this placeholder, say Dysal, right? So now it's a figure, right? So we start with figure, right? Then there is a symbol that I use shift plus to get, right? Shift I think it's Shift and plus. I think if someone sees this, you can tell me the name of that symbol. Then we want to perform cross-references. So we reference, what are we referencing? We are referencing the figure decile, right? We are referencing the figure decile. Let's say we want to add some supplementary text. So this shows the decile logo, right? So let's recompile and see how it is displayed. Right. So we can find it over here. Okay. So figure 1 shows the decile logo, right? So we have it here. Okay. So this is how we perform cross-referencing. You can also do that with regards to tables also. So you can practice that out when we are done with this session. So I'll leave it for some few minutes for us to assimilate, then we go on with the next slide. Okay, so we move on to the next PowerPoint. Okay, right. So we are done with cross-referencing. So footnotes, right? So what do we refer to as footnotes? Now, in our document, right, if you want an extra information, and probably we don't want to distort the pattern of information you are producing in the actual document, you can put that in your footnotes, right? And the footnote is always at the bottom of the page, okay? A footnote is always at the bottom of the page. There is a clear distinction between footnotes and endnotes, okay? With endnotes, it can either be at the end of a whole chapter or the entire document. But footnotes are always at the end of each page. There is a okay, someone is asking how we add comments to our code. Okay, so you just use the percentage sign, okay? You just use the percentage sign. We will demonstrate that when we go back to the code editor. So that is it about the footnotes and the endnotes, right? But for the purposes of this discussion, we are going to demonstrate how we can achieve a footnote. And this is just a screenshot to show how a footnote looks like. So let's go back to our code editor to do that demonstration. Okay, so I'm going to white clean this part. Right, so, okay, this has to go also.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's demonstrate that, and probably we'll be able to relate more to it. Okay, so let's switch from the session called decile information to maybe let's say introduction. Introduction. Right. Good. Now, our introduction, we want it to have some content. So let's come up with any generic contents, right? Let's talk about AI since it's talk of town. So let's say artificial intelligence is maybe, you can also use any form of information you want to put there. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to put this artificial, my spelling is wrong. It's transforming how we analyze data models and make inferred, let's say this INFERED, inferred, it's not wrong, INFERED. Let's continue. We are not checking grammar. So I'm making let's say informed decisions, right? Now we want to put a footnote here just to add more content to it, but we don't want that content to be in our main body. So we issue or we come up with a footnote, right? So whatever you find in the curly braces here is the extra information you need, right? So let's say AI is now used in various sectors of the economy, including maybe health, healthcare, agriculture, and the likes, right? And the likes. Okay, so we have this. Okay, and let's just try to recompile this and see what the output would give us first before we move on. Right, so we have an introduction here saying artificial intelligence is transforming how we analyze data models and make informed decisions. Because this is the first footnote we are issuing, so it's been assigned one, right? And realize that beneath the, how do you call it, beneath that page, the content of that is displayed over here. So if you don't want to put everything over at the main introduction session, you can issue a footnote to do that. So this is an example of how we can make use of a footnote, right? Okay, so let's have another example and see how the numbering is going to take effect. So let's talk about agric. So let's say agriculture is pivotal to national development. Let's just say this, right? Then let's issue a footnote over here. Footnote. Let's talk about various countries are investing into agriculture, right? Agriculture. So let's try to recompile and see, right? So we have the contents here, and it has been assigned to, right? Because it's the next footnote we are doing, okay? And it's over here. So primarily, this is how, I mean, the general concept of how you can do a footnote, right? This is just a general concept of it, right? So I'll leave it for some 30 seconds for you to abreast yourself with it, then we move on to the next. Okay, so the person asks about the commenting, right? This is a way you can comment, okay? It's the percentage symbol. So if I want to comment this entire thing out, you can just bring out a percentage here. So when it turns to green and it has a percentage symbol attached, then it is commented. So that's how you can comment. Okay, so we can move on to our next slide. And okay, we have it here. So we are done with footnotes. Our next slide has to do with creating appendices, right? Creating appendices. And appendices is also very key when it comes to thesis writing, right? Because these contents are usually extra content that you want to use to support your main body, right? But you don't want to include it in your core discussion. So you push all those ones to where appendices. And this is the structure. So you can have all your content, your main contents, and your references. Always note that your references is the last content of your thesis document, the very last. So before your references, your appendix comes in, right? Your appendix comes in. So from the main chapters, then to your appendix before your references. By main chapters, I mean conclusion and all that are inclusive. Before your appendix, then you move to your references, right? And this is created using the appendix command, okay? So we are going to do a demonstration of that. And it's also important to note that a rule of thumb, or usually the generalized or accepted way that we assign appendixes is that we it's alphabetized or alphabets, right? Rather than numbering, we put them in a form of alphabets. Okay, so you are going to demonstrate that to see exactly what we are talking about. So we are going back to our code editor. Okay, let me just close up the space. Okay, so let's get rid of this content. Right. So the appendix, we have an introduction, right? And let's say we want to put some content there. So let's put some content. Where is the mouse? Okay. Let's put some content here. So the content can be website. So we have a content here. Let's recompile that. Okay. So now we've put some content here. Okay. Let's assume, okay, this is just an assumption. Let's assume this is the content of our main body. Now we want to move to our appendix, right? And the appendix must also start from a fresh page or a new page. So we call on page break. Okay, yes, page break, right? Let's refresh to see if we would have a second page. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let's finish with it and see how it's going to be. So we call a page break, then we start with our appendix, APPENDIX, right? Our appendix. Okay. It's calling for a package. Anyway, so this is not where package should be per the convention we learned yesterday. So let's just make it appendix. So with some of these functionalities, you might not need how do you call it, a package, because maybe the package is pre-codified in there, right? With some of them also, you have to clearly spell them out or state them. So let's say our section, let's call this our first appendix. First appendix, right? Let's give it some content. Ellipson, maybe 1. Okay. So let's also assign maybe a second appendix. So session, second appendix. Then let's give it Ellipson. Let's say 2, right? Now let's recompile to see how it's going to be. So you realize that because we issued a page break, right? It's showing as that. But realize that it's showing here as 1 and 2, right? And this is as a result of our introduction, right? It's taking effect on that. So if you want to clear that, let's see if suppressing the introduction numbering would work. Myself, I'm also now trying it. So let's do it together and see if that's going to work. So yesterday we learned how to suppress the introduction number, right? Using the asterisk. So it's still there. So let's try to find a way to debug that. Make title, page break, appendix, first appendix, second. Let's see if we calling the package would appendix. Let's see if calling the package would help that work out. Still interesting. But that is the concept of appendix, right? So appendix is always placed before our references, okay? So that's the concept of how to achieve our appendix. Or let's see, let's try to clear this introduction bit. Maybe that's the reason. Still present. Anyways, so let's not waste much time on that. We would put, we would give you a file that has all the comprehensive content for you to be able to practice it out. But that is the idea of how to create an appendix, right? That is the idea of how to create an appendix. I'm seeing some chats. Okay. Okay, that's fine. So that is about it for that. So let me leave it for some few seconds. So we move on to the next item. See if this would work. Okay. Give me a sec. Let me just try this and see if that is the reason. Then I understand why it's happening that way. Oh, okay. So I think if the document class is changed to an article, we get that format. Anyways, so probably that was the reason, but let's just revert to our old approach. Yeah, Juma, I see your hand up.
Yeah, please, your previous, I think with the appendix, I was seeing like a dot before the one. Should there be a number before the dot, then the next, the
Okay,
first
okay. So
appendix?
yeah, I think this is an error, right? It has to do with we giving the introduction. So you realize that because we don't have a chapter, right? The introduction is assuming 0.1. So let's just try it out. So assuming we put a chapter here, and let's call the chapter introduction. So we call the section overview. Introduction. Let's change this to overview. I'm sure that's the reason why that is happening though, but let's see if it has a chapter. Okay, it's still present. Anyways, we would find a comprehensive approach to get this done. So we share the file. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll find a comprehensive way to get it done and share the file. Right. So I guess we've spent enough time on this. So let's move on to our next slide if we have one. Okay. So I think that's brings us to the end of this presentation, but there is one last thing I would want to show before. Great. So it has to do with this code editor screen, right? So you realize that sometimes putting out the code itself can be tedious, right? Or sometimes certain things we are doing isn't really working out as we want it to. Okay. So there is this visual editor button, right? That is quite low code, okay, where you can just type in plain text and all that. You switch back to the code editor, it's going to give you back the code view, right? So if it is maybe enumeration or itemization you want to do, you are finding it difficult to do that, right? You just go to the visual editor section. You can try it out after the session. Then you just number them, okay? Then you go back to the code editor view. It's going to render it in form of code for you, right? So I believe that is it from my end, and this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Albert. That's a very impressive work. And we believe everyone here really enjoyed the section from yesterday till today. We are so grateful for making the time to be here to take us through the second phase of this journey. We have on the call Dr. Isabel Mensah, who will now proceed from where Albert left off. Again, we want to re-emphasize that this is just the introduction to all the various things we need to kickstart in your typesetting. We'll end up having another section where we will learn how to actually customize your own CLS file. You realize that in his presentation, the appendix, we all wish to see A1, A2, A3, but it came at point 1, point 2. All this can be customized in the CLS file, the STL file, the STY file. This is an advanced section that you and I can spend some more time and get it done. In most universities, this is being done for you. Just pick a template and then put in all you've learned for today's class. Unless you want an advanced feature, then you are free to add them as well. We as a lab have our own custom data or custom template, but it's strictly linked to University of Ghana. So it's unfortunate that you cannot use it outside UG if the plan is to use them outside this training section. For that reason, we're using the normal template just to give you some flair as to how these tools really work. We are very convinced that you kind of enjoy what has happened from day one till now. We'll now invite Dr. Isabel Mensah to take us through the other phase of it, the real thesis structure, and how to handle some other issues, other advanced problems, how to merge, how to stretch, how to pull, all the other things over there. In a unified form in academia, she'll take us through that, and then we believe and hope also that you will enjoy this journey as well. So Dr. Mensah, the floor is yours. The audience, Dr. Mensah is here with us. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. I believe we've learned a lot, and for most of the things it's been mentioned, I'm going to re-emphasize some of the things, and some of the other ones too, we are going to have them as new things that we are going to cover. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, thank you very much, Prof. So this was supposed to start from tomorrow, but because we have some time, we'll start today and wrap it up tomorrow, God willing. So we are going to go through the thesis documentation and referencing. And we are going to cover this outline. We'll look at some introduction. We'll look at how we could edit the files. Albert has done a great job introducing us to inserting tables and images. So we'll do inserting equations in our work, algorithms, and a little bit more on the tables and the images. Then we'll look at how to go about our referencing. All right, so if you were not here the previous day, that was yesterday, you can just follow through and then we see how it goes. Okay, so I believe that a number of us have struggled with margins, with numbering of equations, tables, figures, and a lot of other formatting issues when we are writing our thesis in Word. And as you can see on the screen, the image we have, when you usually want to type with Word, your thesis, you always have to do a lot of alignment. When you would want to do write equations, it's so sometimes, most of the time, it's quite difficult to do them. But these issues are what the LaTeX, what we are going to discuss, addresses. It helps us to separate our content from our formatting. So with the Word document, usually it is one long file. It's just one long document without any breaks when we are writing our thesis. If it's 150 pages, all the 150 pages are together. So most of the time we struggle so much to get everything right, alignment, equations, numbering, everything right. So in LaTeX, it is not like that. We don't have everything as a one long table, but then we have them as different files, different files. So you can think of the thesis documentation itself as a building with different rooms, and every room has what it does. So for example, all the different chapters in your thesis is housed in one folder. Another, let's say your front matter is housed in another folder, and so forth and so on. Then when we are done, when we have all those parts, the main text file controls everything. It puts everything together for us to get the full thesis that we are looking for. So we are going to go through some of the things we have. For the structure of the thesis document, we have the formatting files. So when Prof was just ending, he mentioned about the class files and the style files. Usually, with the thesis document structure, the formatting is separated from the content. So formatting like controlling margins, spacing, numbering, like the way Albert was showing the different chapters, and then we had point 1, point 0, point 1. You can always specify them in your class or your STY folder so that you are able to get a certain consistent file or a very consistent numbering all across the pages of your documents. Now, with the class document, they form the basics of what we are doing, the structure. And like Prof. Riley said, almost every institution has its own thesis document template. So I am with KNUST. I also work with the National Institute for Mathematical Sciences. We have our templates for the students to work with. So there are certain things that once we give the ST file to you, we expect that everybody from our institution should have a common structure, a common file. So if, for example, we specify that all our captions on our tables and images should be at the top, we expect that even though some other people may prefer their caption to be at the down, we prefer it to be at the top, and we expect it to have that structure. So all the formatting rules, the margins, footnote, everything that comes into the formatting, goes into our class file and then our STY files. Then we have the front matter. We don't combine the front matter with the main chapters. So the front matter, something like a cover page, the title, the abstract, the dedication, declaration, and what have you, all those things comes together to form the front matter. So usually you would want to create a page, a folder that will contain the front matter for you. Then we have another folder that contains all the chapters. So from your introduction to conclusion to special chapters to all the chapters is housed in the folder called chapters. You can give it other names, but I prefer to call it chapters because it's just a folder name. Then we have the references. Usually when you would want to work, you are working in LaTeX and you would want to reference it, you use the bib files. We are going to go through all that into details as we continue. Then we have the back matter. The back matter also contains the files that includes your appendix, your supplementary materials, if you have any of them. All those things that come at the back of your thesis after your references is the back matter. So we have different files in the back matter folder that helps us to complete our thesis. Then the very important file is the master file. Usually is the main.tex. The main.tex, it links all the files together, all the files that we have mentioned. It links all of them together and it helps controls the order of the thesis. So for example, if you have your back matter, you have your front matter, you have your main chapters. If in the main.tex file, you call the chapters first before your front matter, that is how it's going to appear. So usually you know the format and then you try to work to fit it. So we are going to take in this lecture, we are going to have about 10 different tasks. Our first task is that we are going to load the thesis template that has been given to us, and then we would want to identify the different parts of the thesis document. So try and find the formatting file. So usually for that folder, they would either call it the class file or the style file, the class folder or the style folder. So you try and find that one. You try and find the front matter, chapters, references, back matter, and the main file. So please, we are switching on to the overleaf so that we'll be able to do that. I believe that by now we have all learned how to upload the templates on overleaf. So if you want to upload, you can. So when you open your overleaf, this is what you have. Because it's a new project, you click on new project. If you want to create a blank project, you click on blank project. But this, we have given you a template. So you would want to just upload the project or the template we have given you. So you go to upload project. And usually, because you have different components in the thesis, you always have to be sure that the document is zipped because you don't have just one file in there. You have several folders in there. So you have to make sure you zip that folder. Then you select the zip file that we are working with. So on your desktop, I don't know what you are working with, but you should find the DISAL training thesis.zip. That is what we have given to you. So you go there, you click on it, you click on select, and then it uploads for you. Okay. So once it uploads for you, it will automatically open up like this. So now the task is saying that you should identify the formatting files, identify the front matter, identify the chapter. So the template we are using is not from KNUST, neither is it from DASAL, neither is it from NAMES, neither is it from UG. we picked it online. So some of the things may be a little bit different from what we do here in Ghana. So as we are going through, we'll be editing it along the way so that you would get to appreciate it much better. So you see the back matter. When you open the back matter, you see the appendixes are there, the annexes are there. So depending on what you're doing, if you have supplementary materials, you can keep them there. Then we have the front matter. You have your list of abbreviation, your abstract, acknowledgements, cover page, declaration, dedication, and what have you. Then for your formatting, over here, we have it as styles. So they have the .sty file. It has all the formatting rules and other packages and other commands that has been used for the work. Okay, we have the chapters. So chapter 1, introduction, literature, all of them are different files. So when you open introduction, it's a different file, methodology, and in that order. Over here, one interesting thing and the main tech file that connects everything together is the main.tech. So the main.tech connects everything together. But then once we create our .sty file, we call it in as a package. And once we call it in as a package, it is going to give us all the formatting rules all throughout the thesis. So you realize that on line 3, we are calling the STY file that they have created. So if it was names thesis that you were working with, you would have names thesis. But then you have to specify the folder that STY file is in. So over here, you see use package. The folder is the styles, and then we have the folder name. All right, then every other thing follows. So we'll be going through it as we progress with the lecture. All right, then one interesting thing that these people did was to create a metadata. So there were some other things that they wanted to define. So usually when you want to define a new command or a new command in LaTeX, you use the command new command. All right. And here they wanted to define or give us how we could edit our name, our thesis title, subtitle, what have you and what have you. So they define that everywhere you see /thesis author, it means that you should provide your full name. Everywhere you see thesis title, it means you should provide your title, your thesis title. So they've defined all these new commands for us into a metadata. Now, when you go into the main file, you will see somewhere on line 8 that they are calling in the metadata such that we will be able to edit our cover page, our title page, and what have you. All right. Okay, so we are going back to the lecture. The first thing we are going to do is to editing of files. And it's all that we are doing. We have taken some people's templates and we are editing into what we want to do. It doesn't mean that you can't create your own templates. If you are a head of department or you want to create a LaTeX document template for your school, you can do that from scratch. You can define your own rules, create your own STY or a class file, define everything you want it to be and put your name on it, and it will become your institution's template. But then when anyone receives the template, they can edit it into their thesis document. However, when you are editing the formatting files, you have to be extra careful. You have to really take precautions when you're editing the formatting files. And some of the reasons why we should take precautions is that usually the .sty or the .class file, they are global formatting rules for the entire thesis. So let's say in KNUST, we have a thesis template for all postgraduate students. when you go into the STY file, all the rules that KNUST needs a standard postgraduate work to follow is in the STY file. Now, when you decide that you don't like something, so you want to go and change it, when you change anything in the STY file, it affects almost every page on your document. Let's say numbering or caption position or anything, it will change almost that particular thing on all the single pages. So by the time you are done, your thesis will be relatively different from your other colleagues. And like I said, every small change affects every page. And then when you have errors, if you are doing your editing in the formatting files and then you have an error, sometimes it's very, very difficult to debug because it's some chunk of codes that they've put together. Sometimes you have to take your time very well to understand them line by line. So if you know that it is not extremely necessary for you to change something in the formatting files, you leave it as it is. And then also, when you edit them, it breaks the consistency across all others. It breaks the consistency across the thesis. So like I said, yours will be different from other people. And the templates are designed to protect beginners. So if you don't know, if you don't have it, if there is a template, it's easier. Just go there, edit whatever you have to edit, and then you leave. So the rule of thumb is that you can edit the content files. You can edit your cover page, your title page, your chapters and front matter, back matter, whatever. But you have to leave the formatting files unchanged, especially if it is not your personal formatting rules, but a global one, like one for KNUST or one for University of Ghana. You would prefer to leave it unchanged. All right. So let's delve a little bit into the front matter. The front matter contains all the preliminary stages of the thesis, like we mentioned earlier. It all comes before so all the content that appears before the first chapter. So you have your abstracts, your acknowledgement, your dedication, and all of that. We refer to them as the front matter. Usually, those chapters are unnumbered. For example, the way you saw Albert display 0.1 introduction, in the front matter, they are not numbered. So you will not see 0.1 abstract, 0.2 list of abbreviations. Usually you wouldn't see that. So those chapters are unnumbered. And most of the time, the page numbers, they come as Roman numerals. But then you would have to specify it in your main thing that all the front matter pages should appear as a Roman numeral. And then the main chapters, of course, will come as an Arabic numeral. So we'll go through them as well. And then for the other table of content, the other front matter that we have, the table of content, the list of figures, list of tables, they all come under it. Just that for the table of content, list of figures, LaTeX generates them automatically. So we don't have to create a file for them. So in the file that we went to inspect, we realized that we saw the title page, we saw abstract, we saw acknowledgement, but we didn't see anything like table of content, list of figures, because LaTeX automatically generates those for us. So let's see. When you want to create the front matter, now because we have a template, it's already there. So we'll just go there and edit it. But let's assume that we didn't have it. The first thing you do is to create a folder. Then, so if you can see my screen, to create a folder, you come here, you come to your overlay, and then you go to new folder. Then you can save it as front matter, like this. So because I already have a front matter, then let me say front matter 22. So now you've created a folder for the front matter. Now, when I enter into the front matter, I can create different files in the front matter. So let's say the first file I want to create is abstract. So abstract 2.2. So when I come here, my abstract is there. So if you don't even have the front matter at all, this is how you go about creating it. All right. So all the time, your different front matter subjects are placed in a folder that we would call the front matter. And then for some of the other front matter issues, like table of contents, list of figures, because we don't have to create a file for them, LaTeX generate them automatically. So all that we have to do, there are default commands in LaTeX that generates the table of contents, the list of figures, etc. for us. So an example, in the main.tex file, which combines everything together, we can do /table of contents like the way I've displayed in 1 and 2, and it will automatically generate it for us and position it well also. Okay, so on the title page, so for the document we have cover page, title page. We don't need all of that. We don't need a cover page necessarily, but for some institutions, you would need a cover page. In KNUST, your title page is enough. But if you want to design your cover page on that hard green thing, then that's fine. You can go and edit your cover page. But then right now, we want to edit our title page. The title page usually displays the name. It displays the title of your thesis and what have you. So we would have the author's name, institution, thesis, supervisors, images, maybe a logo of your institution, blah, blah, blah. So our task 1, our very first task, we would want to go there, we want to go back to the template on Overleaf, look for the title page and update it with our own details. So this is what we do. We go into the front matter. Now in the front matter, you would see title page. Title page. You click on the title page. All right. You click on the title page. If you want, you can also edit the cover page. But when we finish, we'll go and comment the cover page out and then we'll focus on the title page. But for now, I want us to edit the title page. So like I told you from the beginning, they had, from their metadata.text, they had defined where the functions that would take our name, our thesis. So when you come into the title page, anytime you see /thesis author, that means it is asking for the name of the person doing the thesis. So you can come in here, and then the first one we want to edit is the thesis author. So I can clean the /thesis author and put my name in there. Over here, they've already given a command that it should make it an uppercase. So whether you write it in small letters or capital letters, it's still going to appear as an uppercase. So when you finish, you can do Control S, or you can go to compile, and then you should have your name there. Then we have your thesis title. So you go in there, thesis title, and you put something there, whatever you are working on. Then if you have a subtitle, over here it's saying that if it has a subtitle, it should keep it there. If the first slot is empty, it should bring it back as empty. That means you don't have a subtitle. But if you have a subtitle, anywhere you see a subtitle, you should put a subtitle. So let's say our subtitle is single cell RNA seq. All right. Then we come down here and our subtitle is single cell RNA seq. Then we have the thesis type. So the thesis type, is it a project? Is it a thesis? Is it a report? So what if it's a dissertation, whatever it is. So let's say it's your thesis. And then the thesis degree is asking whether it's a Master of Philosophy or a Doctor of Philosophy or a Master of Science or whatever it is, you put it there. So it's let's say it's a Doctor of Philosophy. Okay. Then you have work supervised by. Now you put in your thesis advisors. Most of the time, you would have more than one supervisor, and you would want to show whether it's the person is the main supervisor or the co-supervisor. So here we come, you can do supervisor. Then, so that was where they gave us /thesis advisor. So that's how they defined it in their metadata. So when you see that, it's asking you for the list of your supervisors. So let's say supervisors, your main supervisor, Isabel. Then if you want to specify your other supervisors, you do \2 of them to break the line to the next line. So we can do co-supervisor. Okay, so you can compile it and run it to see what you have so far. So when I compile my thesis title is there, the subtitle is there. This is a thesis and it's a Doctor of Philosophy, and the work is supervised by Isabel and Amalabi. All right. So the next one is an image. Now, in their style file, that .ts file, they defined something called the UALG logo. And they had defined it, they have already inserted the image over there. When we go to the figures in our different folders, we see we have something called figures. Now, when we come into the figures, we see their logo is there, other things is there, other stuff is there. I have added some other stuff there. Now, this could be, the image you see here could be their university logo or something. But I don't belong there, so I would want to change it. But changing this logo, they have specified it in their .sty file. So there is no way I'll be able to change it here on the cover page, on the cover page file. So you would have to come into the STY file. If it was a Legon or a KNUST file, automatically they would have put a KNUST or a UG logo over there. So let's come into our style. Then here you have to be very careful and look one after the other where they defined the logo. So you realize that on line 111, they defined a new command. And the new command was /LALG logo. So you could have given it any name because it's a new command they are giving. You could have just said UG logo or KNUST logo, anything, then it's saying that if the logo exists, we should check the path of the figures. If the logo exists, then you should include that logo in here. So let's do it together. I have included a KNUST image over here already. You can also go online, download any image at all, and come and upload it. I know Albert has taken you through that, so I will not waste a lot of time there. Now we are going to keep the command, their command name, which is the UALG logo. We are going to keep it. Now we are saying that if file exists, where does the file exist? Is the file in the figures? And is it a KNUST.png? We are going to look for it if it is there. So the first thing we do, we are going to change everything here. And where will our image be? Our image is going to be in figures, the folder called figures. The folder called figures. Then in the folder called figures, we are looking for an image called KNUST.png. Because I have it here, knway.png. Now I'm saying that if this image exists in that file, in that folder called figures, then it should include that image. So the image is, we still have to show our path here, KNUST figures over here. Then we run it. Control. Great. So because we've been able to identify where the image command is, we are able to go in there, edit it, and then change the image to suit the institution that we are working with. So usually, for example, if there was no KNUST image there, we were telling it that it should give us a rectangular box that will write UALG/FTC logo. So if the image doesn't exist, that was the command it was going to give to us. So let's say that I rename this as, let me rename this as KNUST1. Okay, and let's go back into our ST file. Okay, so let's say I've changed the name of the image. Now when I run this, it's going to give me this, a rectangular box with a name in it. And that's what I've asked it to do over here. That means that it couldn't find the image in the folder I had specified it to be. So all the time, you have to make sure that the image you want to work with is well defined in where you are, it's well defined in your figures or your images table, your images folder. All right. So we were in the STY file. So when we run this again, we are going to get the KNUST logo. Okay, so we go back into our front matter on our cover page. There is still a few things to edit. So we go back to our title page. And then on our title page, we still have the thesis university. So after the logo, we have thesis university. So you come here, if you're working in KNUST, you say KNUST, and which thesis faculty. Usually we do department. So let me say Department of Mathematics. All right. So once you run it, everything works well for you. We have the thesis here as well. So if it's not 2026, it's 2020 something else, you can still edit it and then you compile it and you are good to go. So we move on, but our time is almost up. So we have 2 minutes remaining. If there are any questions, I can take them. Otherwise, I will just show you this. Then you would go and try it. And then tomorrow we discuss it. All right. So when we want to, after we have created our various files in the front matter, now we've seen how to edit, how we have edited the title page. If you want to edit the cover page, if the cover page is so important to you and you'd want to still work with the cover page, you would have to go in there and locate your cover page where it's also in the front matter, cover page. Yes, cover page is here. And then you can edit it like we have done. As simple as that. Now, when you pick each of the files in the front matter, example, the abstract, it's usually a blank page because when you create it, like what I created, I created one. I don't know. Okay, I think I left that. So let's say, let me quickly do this. Usually, great. I created front matter 2.2 and the abstract usually it's a blank page. When you create the file, it's a blank page. So the first thing you do is to show that it is a chapter called abstract. But because in regular thesis, we don't like to number the front matter issues, you always have to put an asterisk on the chapter so that it wouldn't number it. So we have abstract. So you do /chapter abstract. Then we would want to add the abstract chapter to the table of content, the TOC. So you add this line, add content line, TOC. Once you specify these 2 lines, they are the most basic and most important 2 lines that you need so that it can pick it as the abstract and it can add the abstract as the abstract to the table of content. Then it continues. So everything that you'd want to say, this study, you just write it. Usually the abstract, you don't have paragraphs, you don't have breaks. It's just usually one, depending on the type of abstract you want to write. Sometimes you'd have to do intro, methods, what have you. But whatever you'd want to do, the entire body goes here. So like I said, the asterisk removes the numbering and then the add content also add it there. So when we come to the front matter, we can come and look for abstract. These people, I think they speak Portuguese and then so they did their things in English and Portuguese. So you can ignore all the abstract PT, it's in Portuguese, and then let's focus on the English. So they define a few more things here, but we don't want to bother ourselves with them. If you are creating your own chapter, your own abstracts and stuff, the 2 main things I had just shown you, they are the most important ones, but they brought a few more things that you would want to consider. And you start with your write-up. So everything that you need to write can go in here, and then so usually you wouldn't want to put it in a square bracket. I'm sure because of the template sake, that's why they put it in a square bracket. But all the time, everything that you need, you just write it here. Okay, let me use a dummy test. I think it's the Lipsam, if I'm right. Lipsam, let me do 2 to 4. Now, when I run this, okay, they inserted their abstract somewhere, yeah, over here. So when I run it, I should have my abstracts here as a dummy. And usually you would want to define your keywords. So you leave some space in between. The V space means vertical space. So you have horizontal space and vertical space. So if you want to leave some space between the abstract and the keywords, you do your vertical space, sometimes 5 centimeters, depending on what you're doing, or 2 centimeters, 0.2, 0.1, depending on how wide you want the space to be. So I would want you to go and try your hands on it, at least for the abstracts, the abstracts, the acknowledgements, the dedication. I think declaration, it's one of the things that I would give you a simple code for you to go and try on. So let me close up with this. When you create your various front matter and then you want to insert them in the main text file. The main text file. When you create it, it's not enough. If you don't call it in the text file, you wouldn't see it. So we are running it and we are seeing it because it has been called in the main text file. Now, the first thing that we were interested in was the page numbering. We said we wanted it to appear as a Roman number. So once again, Albert took you through that. So the page numbering for the front matter should all appear as Roman numbers. So what we do, the function we call is /input. Now input, when you do input, the folder that the front matter would be lying in is the front matter folder. So you indicate front matter /abstract, front matter /acknowledgement. So in this order, it would appear in this order. If you don't arrange it in this order, and let's say you do front matter declaration before front matter abstract, you should expect that it would appear like that. It will not automatically arrange it for you. So on your main.tex file, when you come here, you would see from line 17, we are starting the front matter issues. That's how they did this. So you see input formatting title page, inputs front matter declaration, input front matter abstracts, etc., etc. Please note that this is just their templates. In Ghana, our typical outline is abstracts, acknowledgements, dedication, declaration, list of abbreviation, before table of content, list of figures. So you should know the structure. Please, you should know the structure and then work accordingly. So you see that they arrange it in certain order. So when you come here on their file, the way they've arranged it, that is how it's showing. So the first one was their title page, then their declaration. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.